My name is Adam, and I thought I had the perfect life. I lived in Seattle, one of the most vibrant cities in America, where the rain always seemed to whisper promises of growth and renewal. I was married to Emma, my high school sweetheart. She was beautiful, intelligent, and the kind of woman who could light up a room with just her presence. We built a life together over 10 years of marriage that many would envy. A lovely home, 2 adorable golden retrievers, and careers that kept us busy but fulfilled. I ran a successful software development company, a dream I had nurtured since my teenage years. Emma, on the other hand, was a therapist specializing in relationships and intimacy. Her work fascinated me. She was always helping people navigate their emotions, their connections, their wounds. Ironically, I never suspected that her own heart might stray from the very principles she preached. For the past 2 years, things had felt different between us. At first, I dismissed it as the inevitable ebb and flow of a long marriage. Life gets busy. People grow and change. But there were subtle signs. Emma started working later. Her phone became her constant companion, and the warmth of her touch seemed colder, more mechanical. The once intimate dinners we shared turned into conversations about her clients, her schedule, or what needed fixing around the house. Yet, I still adored her, or at least the version of her that I had built in my mind. The cracks in our foundation were there, but I refused to see them, blindfolded by love, trust, and, perhaps, complacency. Enter Sarah. Sarah was my assistant and had been for nearly 5 years. She was efficient, brilliant, and intuitive in ways that made her irreplaceable at work. Sarah was also my friend. She had an easy laugh and a sincerity that made her a joy to be around. But what I hadn't noticed until recently was the way her eyes lingered on me during meetings, or how her voice softened when we talked about non-work matters. I'll admit, the realization unsettled me. Here was someone who seemed to know me in ways Emma had stopped trying to. But Sarah never crossed any boundaries, nor did I. I chalked it up to a harmless admiration on her part, though now I wonder if I was lying to myself about that, too. It all started with the suggestion that we see someone to help rekindle the intimacy in our marriage. It was Emma's idea. At first, I balked at the notion. How could we need help when we had everything? But Emma insisted, her eyes pleading, her tone just shy of desperate. And so, we found ourselves sitting across from Dr. Nathan Harper. Dr. Harper was polished, charismatic, and confident. His office was decorated in warm tones, designed to put you at ease. He had a way of listening that made you feel heard, as though your words mattered more than anything else in that moment. Emma trusted him instantly. I wasn't so sure. Our sessions were challenging, sometimes uncomfortable. Dr. Harper asked probing questions about our lives, our desires, our disappointments. Emma opened up in ways I hadn't seen in years, and for a while, I felt hopeful. Maybe this was what we needed. Maybe Emma's growing distance wasn't about me, but about something deeper that she needed to heal. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to notice something odd. Emma seemed more energized after our sessions with Dr. Harper, but not in a way that translated to our relationship. She would come home flushed and distracted, her eyes glimmering with a spark that wasn't meant for me. I tried to convince myself that it was progress, a sign that she was rediscovering herself. Still, doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. It was Sarah who first voiced what I had been too afraid to admit. "Adam, can I say something without overstepping?" she asked one evening after hours. We were the only ones left in the office, the rain tapping against the windows like a metronome. I nodded, my curiosity piqued. "I don't want to intrude, but something doesn't feel right about Emma and that therapist of yours," she said carefully, her hands fidgeting with a pen. "I've seen how you've been lately, and I just think maybe you should look closer." Her words landed like a stone in my chest. I wanted to dismiss her concerns, to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, I couldn't. Because I had noticed it too. The late nights Emma claimed were for work, the guarded way she spoke about her sessions when I asked, and the way her phone seemed to vibrate endlessly with messages she never shared. "Thanks, Sarah," I said finally, though the words felt hollow. "I'll keep it in mind." Sarah's concern stayed with me, though, and it wasn't long before I decided to act. Emma's behavior was no longer something I could ignore. If there was any hope of saving our marriage, I needed the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Driven by a gnawing suspicion, I decided to check Emma's phone one evening when she left it charging in the kitchen. My heart raced as I scrolled through her messages, half hoping I would find nothing. But there it was, a thread of text between her and Dr. Harper. They weren't overtly romantic, but they carried an undercurrent of intimacy that had no place in a professional relationship. Driven by a gnawing suspicion, I decided to check Emma's phone one evening when she left it charging in the kitchen. My heart raced as I scrolled through her messages, half hoping I would find nothing. But there it was, a thread of text between her and Dr. Harper. They weren't overtly romantic, but they carried an undercurrent of intimacy that had no place in a professional relationship. Tonight was amazing. You always know exactly what I need. One message read, "You're incredible, Emma. I'm counting the hours until I see you again," another replied. My hands trembled as I put the phone down. The words swam before my eyes, confirming what I had tried so hard to deny. Emma wasn't just distant. She was gone. She had given a part of herself to someone else, and I was left with the pieces of what we once had. The betrayal cut deep, but so did the questions. How long had this been going on? Was I so blind, so naive, that I hadn't seen the signs sooner? And most of all, what was I going to do about it? I confronted Emma that night. She didn't deny it. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed, her voice trembling with guilt and shame. She tried to explain it away. She felt lost, unfulfilled, disconnected. But her reasons didn't matter to me in that moment. The trust we had built over years of love and commitment had been shattered, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. The days after Emma's confession were a blur. It was as though my entire world had been thrown into chaos. I spent hours replaying every moment, every conversation, every smile she shared that now felt tainted by deceit. The walls of our home seemed to close in on me, a silent witness to a life that was no longer mine. Emma insisted on staying, claiming she wanted to fix what was broken. She promised she would cut ties with Dr. Harper, swearing she would do anything to regain my trust. But her words felt hollow, as if they were meant more to soothe her own guilt than to mend the damage she had caused. I tried to focus on work, pouring myself into my projects to distract from the gnawing pain. Sarah was a constant presence, her support steady and unspoken. She didn't pry or push, but her concern was evident in every glance, every kind word. She became my anchor in a sea of uncertainty, though I knew it was unfair to lean on her so heavily. One evening, Sarah stayed late to help me finalize a presentation. The office was quiet, the hum of computers and the patter of rain outside the only sounds. As I looked over the slides, I caught her watching me. There was something in her eyes, something tender, yet restrained. "Adam," she began hesitantly, "I know this isn't my place, but you don't have to go through this alone." I set down my pen, meeting her gaze. "Sarah, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Everything feels broken." "You're not broken," she said softly, her voice steady. "You're hurt, and you have every right to be, but you're stronger than you think." Her words lingered with me long after she left. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope, not for my marriage, but for myself. Despite Emma's promises, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her betrayal than she had admitted. My suspicions led me to dig deeper, and one evening, I found myself logging into her email account. It was a line I never thought I'd cross, but desperation has a way of eroding boundaries. What I discovered confirmed my worst fears. There were countless messages between Emma and Dr. Harper, spanning months. Their exchanges were intimate, filled with shared jokes, confessions, and plans for secret meetings. One email in particular made my blood run cold. A reservation for a weekend getaway at a secluded cabin, made just weeks before her confession. My hands shook as I printed the emails, each page a testament to her lies. I felt sick, betrayed not only by her actions but by the realization that she had chosen to invest her energy and passion into someone else while I was left in the dark. Armed with this new evidence, I confronted Emma once more. This time, there was no room for excuses. She broke down, admitting to the affair in full detail. Her tears and apologies felt meaningless, drowned out by the anger and pain that consumed me. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Emma, I said, my voice trembling. You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything we built together. Her sobs echoed through the house as I walked away, leaving her to face the weight of her actions alone. In the aftermath of the confrontation, I found myself turning to Sarah more than ever. Her presence was a balm for my wounded soul, her kindness a stark contrast to the chaos that had overtaken my life. We began spending more time together, not just at work, but outside of it. She invited me to join her for coffee, to take walks in the park, to simply talk about anything but the mess my life had become. It was during one of these walks that she revealed something that caught me off guard. I've cared about you for a long time, Adam, she admitted, her cheeks flushing. Since high school, actually, but you were always with Emma, and I didn't want to come between you. I stopped in my tracks, staring at her in disbelief. Sarah, why didn't you ever say anything? Because you were happy, she said simply, and that's all I ever wanted for you. Her honesty left me speechless. I realized then how blind I had been, how much I had overlooked the quiet ways she had supported me over the years. In that moment, something shifted between us, a connection that had always been there but had never been acknowledged. As I sifted through Emma's emails, my hands trembled with a mixture of guilt and determination. The messages confirmed what I had feared. While Emma had admitted to crossing emotional boundaries with Dr. Harper, the evidence painted a far more devastating picture. There were photos, nothing explicit but intimate enough to leave no doubt. Shared dinners, subtle touches captured in stolen moments, and notes exchanged about times and places I didn't recognize. Each message unraveled a thread of my reality. Emma had constructed an entire separate life in the shadows of our marriage. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal but the realization that she had become a stranger to me. She was someone who could lie so effortlessly, who could smile at me during breakfast while planning a rendezvous with him later. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me like an anchor. My mind churned with questions I didn't know how to answer. How could she do this? Why wasn't I enough? And what was I supposed to do now? The only person I felt I could turn to was Sarah. She had always been my confidant, my rock, and though I knew leaning on her was dangerous territory, I was too broken to care. The next day, I called Sarah into my office after hours. The building was eerily quiet, and the rain outside painted streaks on the windows, mirroring the tears I refused to sheath. I showed her the emails. She read them in silence, her expression shifting from disbelief to anger. Adam, she finally said, her voice trembling with emotion, you didn't deserve this. Her words were a balm to my wounded heart. For the first time in weeks, someone validated my pain, acknowledged the betrayal for what it was. Sarah reached out and placed her hand over mine. The warmth of her touch sent a spark through me, a reminder that I wasn't completely alone. I don't know what to do, Sarah, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, her gaze searching mine. You don't have to decide everything right now, but you need to put yourself first. Stop trying to fix something Emma has already destroyed. Her words were bold, but they struck a chord. For too long, I had been trying to salvage a relationship that Emma had already discarded. Maybe it was time to let go. The tension between us hung heavy in the air, unspoken but palpable. When Sarah leaned in to hug me, I held her a little longer than I should have. It wasn't a moment of passion, but of solace, two broken people finding comfort in each other's presence. Yet, it stirred something within me, a longing for connection, for intimacy, for something real. Over the following weeks, Emma's promises to repair our marriage grew more hollow. She stopped attending therapy with me, claiming she needed space to think. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. She was my anchor, my confidant, and the one person who made me feel seen. One evening, after another argument with Emma, I found myself calling Sarah. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and comforting. Do you want to come over? She asked, and without hesitation, I said yes. Her apartment was cozy, filled with books and plants that reflected her quiet strength and nurturing nature. We talked for hours, sharing stories and laughter that felt like a salve on my wounded heart. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace. As the night wore on, the space between us closed. When our lips finally met, it wasn't impulsive or reckless. It was a culmination of months of unspoken emotions, a connection that had been building in the shadows of my crumbling marriage. The kiss was tender, filled with a yearning that went beyond physical attraction. For the first time, I felt wanted, not as an obligation, but as a choice. The morning after, reality hit me like a freight train. I wasn't the kind of man who believed in running from problems or compounding mistakes. But now, I had to face the truth. I couldn't live in the limbo of my broken marriage any longer. I confronted Emma that evening, laying everything bare. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "We've both made mistakes, but this is over." Emma looked at me with a mix of shock and resignation. Perhaps she had expected me to keep fighting, to keep clinging to the remnants of what we once had. But there was nothing left to save. We had both crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, and it was time to let go. The divorce process was messy, as all endings are. But through it all, Sarah was there, a constant source of support and strength. Our relationship grew in the light of honesty, free from the shadows of guilt and betrayal. She taught me that love could be healing, that it could be a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. Looking back, I realized that Emma's betrayal, as painful as it was, forced me to confront truths about myself and my marriage that I had ignored for too long. It taught me that love isn't about perfection but about authenticity, about showing up even when it's hard. Now, as I walk into the next chapter of my life, I hold on to one lesson above all. Sometimes, the hardest endings are the ones that lead to the most beautiful beginnings.